Today we are going to discuss about the portfolio construction and the indexes with Alexander Berg, who is founder of the company called Index One. And let's jump in. So, hello, Alex. Those of you who don't know you, can you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Alex, and I'm the founder of Index One. I'm originally from Finland, currently based in London, UK, and I've been working in the fintech space for about 6 years in total, and currently working on our startup company, Index One, which I've been doing for the past 2.5 or 3 years.
Thank you for the introduction, Alex. If I can call you Alex, is it okay for you?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay. What do you think? What are the main challenges people are facing these days to get involved in the ESG investing space? We see the recent growth; it's quite significant, and but there are a lot of big names. But what do you think that what are still the main challenges despite all this progress?
Right. So yeah, as you mentioned, ESG investing has really taken off in recent years. The primary entry point to ESG investing is through ETFs. So there's been a huge amount of ESG ETF launches in the past few years. And in addition to that, there's been mutual fund products, new ESG data providers coming into the space, index providers offering ESG solutions, ESG indices. So the space has really taken off. In terms of challenges, there's getting into an ETF sort of product or getting some kind of ETF exposure is actually not that challenging in itself. You can buy an ESG ETF the same way you would buy any stock through a broker or through your bank, or there's different types of specialist applications, like apps that let you invest in these products. But the hard part, I think, from my perspective, is getting an actual view of how these ESG products are constructed and actually getting the exposure you want when you're sort of buying an ESG product. So a lot of people will think about sort of ESG as an umbrella term, and they see a label on a product and they go and buy it, and maybe they think it fits their views or personal sort of morals, but that might not necessarily be the case. So there's a big sort of issue of choice and transparency, in my view, as it relates to these.
When it comes to the choice, would you say about the retail investment side of the things, like there is less choice?
Yeah, absolutely. So essentially every entry point into ESG investing for the retail side is a packaged product. So an investor is essentially relying on their ETF issuer, so like BlackRock, Vanguard, or whoever, or ultimately the index provider who calculates the underlying index of that ETF. So like an MSCI or FTSE, they're relying on their ESG views to match their own, rather than having that much say in what actually goes into the portfolio. So just as an example, there's ESG products out there that contain significant weightings in like carbon intensive companies, even oil and gas companies. There's more controversial things like I don't know, let's say Apple. Some might argue it's not sort of might not fit their own ESG criteria while it still exists in certain products. So that's kind of the challenge, is combining your own views with what's available in the sort of investment universe.
Well, yeah, thank you. This has been very informative and insightful. But let's discuss about thematic investing, which is also becoming very popular in ESG and climate investing circles these days. What do you think that how this good portfolio construction practices, or making an index in a maybe more nicer way or less problematic way can help in this? Do you have any experience with that?
Yeah, so thematic investing, similar to the ESG space, is also done primarily through ETFs and underlying indexes. So ETF issuers will create, together with index providers, different types of thematic products, like, let's say, a robotics ETF or a medical technology ETF or similar, which essentially is a basket of companies which have significant exposure to a certain space. The main sort of issues there, in my view, are around just informing investors about the risks. A lot of themes, may sound very exciting on paper, but there are certain sort of themes that are overhyped, so to speak, and the valuations of the companies in there might be extremely high in some cases. There are certain themes where there aren't that many companies operating in the space, so there's a lack of diversification. And the third one I would say is the management fees. So providers of thematic products will generally charge much higher fees compared to sort of passive, more generic products. So that's another thing to look out for the sort of retail investor.
Yeah, absolutely. This fee is quite high. I completely agree with you. Thing aside, now things are quite improving. I see a lot of progress in this space. So tell us about how Index One can make the investors' journey more easy, especially retail investors, or especially the investors which are not so big. Can you please tell?
Yeah, absolutely. So our solution is a bit of a sort of twist on how indexing has or currently works in the market. So the current kind of setup, as I alluded to earlier, is you generally have an index provider creates a basket of stocks according to some rules. An ETF issuer will pick that up, package it into a product, and offer it to the retail market. And us as an index provider, instead of creating sort of these indexes or baskets ourselves, we instead essentially license out the tools for anyone to construct any type of index. So an institution or a retail investor can use us to build, let's say, a thematic basket or an ESG index that sort of complies with their own views. You can create, let's say, an index of, you know, local companies which aren't in the oil and gas sector, filter out other controversial industries like defense, I don't know, mining, whatever you might have in mind, pick out individual names, and our system will calculate essentially a passive index or a passive sort of calculation over time of how this strategy performs, and regularly rebalance it. So include, you know, new IPOs that fit the criteria, readjust the weightings of the basket, and yeah, so it's kind of a self-service way to give you the exposure you would actually want, rather than subscribing to what an ETF provider has given you. So yeah, that's essentially the point behind our product.
Yeah, I will not let you go free without thinking about the challenges people might actually face while using such products. How do you address the tracking error when you are building a portfolio like this with your approach? Do you have any tools or manual to help the investors in actually solving this issue?
So tracking error, I guess, can mean a lot of different things, but you know, in this instance, if you're thinking about sort of getting the actual exposure you want, an index on our system will basically run by itself, but you have full visibility into what the current composition of the index is, what the upcoming changes to the index are going to be. So let's say ahead of a scheduled rebalance, you can see that certain companies are scheduled to be included, which don't necessarily fit your ideals for whatever reason. You can make necessary adjustments to that before it actually occurs. So the key thing is really getting sort of the, I guess, advanced knowledge of any changes and the ability to act on those before they sort of appear. And the other thing I would mention as well is, you know, we're primarily just a data service, so we calculate an index, and it's up to a user to decide sort of how they actually utilize it. So if they track it sort of manually with their own brokerage account, use rebalancing software, or have an investment advisor, for example, who tracks the index for them. So there's still kind of another layer of I guess, decision making before it actually ends up in your portfolio.
That was very nice and insightful. I'm happy that you have this more, you know, like more diverse approach to this. And yeah, so we are now going to close this today's session. So I would like to ask you that how people can get involved with you and how people can get in touch if they have any questions regarding index fund and what type of products you have and the work you are doing.
Yeah, so the best way is really through our website, indexone.io. We have some resources there to kind of help explain how the product works and what types of users we serve. Um, you we have kind of a self sign up, so anyone can register and take a look at the product, start using it essentially immediately. So that's definitely the best way to get started.
Yeah,
And yeah, you can contact us as well for any other questions or further information.
thank you very much for this. And everyone, this was Alexander Berg, or Alex Berg, from Index One on ESG, climate and money show. Please stay in touch, and let's discuss more in the future. Thank you, Alexander.
Great, thanks.